morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We will get started, though I know there's a number of people who will still be joining us. Thank you all for being here. I'm Kimberly Collins. I'm the Executive Director of the Leonard Transportation Center. We're very happy to have you all here today to talk about a very timely and interesting topic, I believe, in thinking about the innovations of goods movements in the Inland Empire. We have a great lineup for you today to hear about goods movement from multiple different sectors. So thinking about it from a built environment, we have Gretchen Ivy coming to speak about the built environment for us. Thinking about it from a technological perspective within our freight trucks, our 18-wheelers, and we have Troy Musgrave, who's been kind enough to join us today to speak about the innovations that are happening within the fleet itself. And then we have Rebel Brown, who's speaking about quantum computing and the use of supercomputers and how they can help to streamline the logistics movement. And then finally, we have Mario Orso from Caltrans, who will be speaking about a really innovative public-private partnership. So innovation within government, thinking about how we can better work together to move TrackMed along. So with that, I would like to invite up a very good colleague and one of our main sponsors, Greg Holsizer, to say a few words.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's amazing. I can't believe we're almost through our fourth year of these dialogues. And I think each year we have a discussion about, well, what more can we talk about? Every 2 months for the past, 4+ years. But the topics are never ending. So I'm looking forward to continuing our partnership going forward. But let me just say on behalf of HNTB, my colleagues in the Inland Empire, Southern California, and across the country, welcome to this session on goods movement. Certainly, as Kimberly said, very, very timely right now. We all understand it's a supply chain. It's quite a network of activities, but clearly this is one where we hope to be making vast improvements in the coming years. So thank you for our speakers today. Thank you for all for joining us. It's just a privilege to be part of this program with Leonard Transportation Center. So Kimberly, back to you.
Thanks so much, Greg. And now I'd like to invite up the Dean of the Jack H. Brown College of Business and Public Administration, Shanti Shannervis. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good morning, everybody. And on behalf of the Jack Brown College of Business and Public Administration here at Cal State San Bernardino, I wish you all a very warm welcome. I'm delighted that you're here to join us at the William and Barbara Leonard Transportation Center's Dialogue Series, which you all have participated in before and know how engaging it can be, which brings together people like you, community leaders, in a discussion of how to best address the region's mobility needs. So today's topic, innovations in goods movement, is a particularly relevant one as we continue to experience the dramatic changes in technology, supply chain challenges, and consumer behavior patterns that have resulted in even greater demand for an integrated transportation system, especially in our region, the Inland Empire, often referred to as the Inland Port region. I want to thank Dr. Kimberly Collins and Dr. Yun-Fei Hao for their commitment and hard work with the LTC. I'd also like to acknowledge our sponsors, our platinum sponsors from HNTB, Greg Holsizer and Carrie Witt. Hello to both of you. The San Bernardino International Airport with Mike Burrows there. Hello. San Bernardino Valley College. Big shout out to Kenny Melancon, and our gold sponsors, Woodruff, Spradling and Smart, the Ontario International Airport, and Metrolink. And of course, all of our silver sponsors and the planning committee members. I hope you find today's dialogue inspiring and that we can all collectively gain better insights on how to tackle this somewhat wicked problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Shannervis. It's great to have you as our leader right now. We really appreciate you. Okay, with that, within the chat, you'll see that our program is available that gives our speakers bios and an overview of the day's events. So I welcome you to open up that link. going to do our first poll for the day, because part of this is to have as well a interactive portion of the program. So we're going to start with a few questions for you all before we begin with our first speakers. So this has two questions to it. The first, thinking about what do you see as the biggest challenge for new innovations in the goods movement? So that's all parts of the logistics and transportation sector. And then the second question within this first set of questions is, given that freight movement is key to the local, state, and national economy, how can we improve the system to increase efficiency and decrease the negative impacts on the environment? So our biggest response here, 45%, was resistance to change. I think that is something as a society we do need to look at more, and then followed up by all of the above for what are the biggest challenges. Our second response, looking at sharing technology, and then all of the above, sort of both put out there. And we have one response into the other, the electrification of freight of all modes. So thinking about, how do we really move forward and think about the connections of the freight industry with, of course, the supply of energy and the movement of energy that comes with that. All right, thank you so much. With that, we'll move on to our first speaker. I'd like to welcome Gretchen Ivy from HNTB.
Right. Well, thank you, Kimberly, for having me here today to talk a little bit about the I-10 Corridor Coalition and their first ever deployment that they're doing together for a truck parking availability system. Just to give you some perspective on HNTB's role, we're the consultant project manager assisting the 4 states with this regional technology and freight deployment. And so just to give you a little background on the I-10 Corridor Coalition, it's a partnership between California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas across the roughly 1,700 mile I-10 corridor to really look at ways they could form a partnership and enhance freight movements and other technologies they could do as a team across that I-10 corridor. It was formed in 2016, and some of their key focus areas that they're looking at doing is really how can they better resource share across the 4-state region? Are there economies of scale they could recognize from working together that makes it, it's powerful if one state does it, but it's much more powerful if all 4 states can do it across a regional corridor like this. There's things like the TPAS I'm going to talk about in a minute that has this joint testing element to it. And they have a whole host of different freight and ITS types of technologies they kind of want to ultimately do testing around. And then really also just to share lessons learned and best practices, both as a region on this part and then possibly in the future with the rest of the I-10 corridor to the east. And so the TPAS, this truck parking availability system, is really their first deployment that they're doing as a partnership. And what it does is it's not looking at adding additional parking capacity to the I-10 corridor. It's really focused on an ITS type of system that will really monitor and provide real-time truck parking availability information to truck drivers and their dispatchers, so that as they're planning their routes along the I-10 corridor, they can be in a good position to find safe and available and convenient parking for either their hours of rest, hours of service rest that they need to do, they have to take breaks, or they just need to stage. When we get to California here in a minute, I'll talk about why that's so important. They're really at first on this as a pilot being deployed at rest areas in those 4 states. There is an opportunity in the future to potentially do private truck stops and other types of facilities, but that first deployment will be at rest areas. There's 37 of them across the corridor, and you can see them on the blue dots on the screen right there, of which 6 of them are in the California area. It's funded through a federal grant called an Advanced Transportation Congestion Management Technology Deployment Grant. And so it's a grant developed by the federal government that's really focused on kind of freight and technology deployments. And so it was a great fit for that. And the states are giving one-to-one matching funds to make it an ultimate, $13 to $15 million deployment. And it will launch in about mid-2023. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about just why is a TPAS needed? And as Kimberly was talking about earlier in relation to the Inland Empire, you're seeing a greater and greater amount of truck traffic. And especially, coming out of the COVID situation, we're reliant so much on that goods movement and those goods delivery, just even as a resident, in addition to businesses. And so if you think about that, truck parking comes along with that because they have hour of service requirements they have to meet, that they can either get fines or job loss if they don't meet those required rest mandated breaks. And so truck drivers today can spend, more than 80% of drivers are searching for parking more than 30 minutes. And as you see on here, even 40% an hour or longer. So they really have to be thinking proactively about where can I stop and do those breaks? Because, often when they're getting closer to their delivery facilities, they're finding that there is no parking and they cannot park at those facilities. And so, in addition to the stress of, every day with their job, there's the stress of just this parking situation. And so we want to make sure that we don't have fatigued drivers, operating on the road either. And so we really want to make sure that there's this chance through this TPAS to have, informed decision making so that they're less likely to be on the road searching for parking under unsafe operating conditions. And so why does this matter on I-10 specifically? If you think about the I-10 portion of the corridor, this 4-state piece that we're looking at, these are some just general statistics that were developed as a part of the grant application, and that, as we're working towards looking at the benefits of a TPAS system, we were able to estimate as a result of this. And one thing we have to use as a benchmark is, prior to this deployment, the MASTO region, which is sort of the Midwest and Great Lakes states, did an 8-state deployment that HNTB was a part of. And that TPAS system, it's called TPIMS there, is actually already operational and has been for 3 years. And so there's a lot of lessons learned on the benefits we could see. You're going to see some statistics on here from a safety standpoint, from an environmental standpoint with, savings in fuel, reduction in emissions. And then there's just the mobility benefits that the truck drivers, trucking industry can see from what you see up here. 27,000 hours are estimated to be saved just from putting in a system like this. And so the types of savings and why that matters so much is, this portion of the I-10 freight corridor is responsible for economic impact of, 1.38 trillion annually. And so this is sort of why truck parking matters, especially so much on this piece of the I-10 corridor. And so specific to California, Caltrans, I know we have Caltrans representatives on the phone with us here today. They did a statewide truck parking study that kind of helped inform their part of the TPAS project. And so I have it up here on screen, kind of a snapshot of some of the conditions and issues with truck parking. You can see that the red means overcapacity. And so you can see a lot of red on that screen as far as, approximately 60% of truck stops and then 50% of publicly owned safety rest areas are at or over capacity, during those peak times of the day. And peak times of the day for trucking is a lot different than what we experience, as a passenger vehicle. So that can be 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. And so those overnight hours are so critical for their hours of service break. And then relevant specifically to the Inland Empire, there are no major truck parking facilities within 50 miles of the ports of Los Angeles or Long Beach. And so when you think about them needing to make decisions and be proactive about where to park, where to stage to get ready for deliveries, that's why you see so much congestion, and being able to offer a system like a TPAS gives them some opportunities to kind of plan in advance, think through their parking decisions so that we don't have some of these congestions as they approach things like the ports. Next slide. And so here's just a snapshot of what that is on the California corridor. They have 6 different facilities that they're going to deploy the TPAS at, kind of listed on here. Right now they're focused on evaluating different detection technologies and procurement methods. And I'll talk here in a minute about what some of those detection technologies might be, but just sort of the ways that they plan to collect the data, monitor these sites. And so they're getting ready to procure the design and system integration here as kind of their next step in California. And so I wanted to step back and just talk a little bit about just the vision for a TPAS type of system. And it's really, as the 4 states were working together, they wanted to really help commercial vehicles, make safer and more efficient truck parking decisions through this user-focused type of system. And, so they spent a lot of time thinking, we definitely know we need to add additional capacity at some point, but where's the best place to add the most impact? Where are we constantly seeing overcapacity conditions? And so a system like this, as they thought about the vision, is really about better informing the future needs for truck parking capacity, as well as just giving information. And so there's also that safety benefit, some of those, emission benefits that they would see. And then really part of it for them was the ensuring a harmonious and consistent, messaging and operations, so that it felt seamless as the goods movement happens and flows across those state boundaries. Freight doesn't stop at the edge of the borders of each state. And so they really have to think as a region about, controlling that flow or improving that flow. And then they want it to be sustainable and scalable, so that if they want to add other corridors in the future, or if other states want to join on to the east on I-10, there's that scalability, the flexibility to do so. And I just, on the next slide, wanted to just quickly summarize some of the goals. And so really they're related to a lot of the benefits you saw, on why the truck parking mattered. And so one is to reduce fatigue-related truck-involved crashes. The crash statistics are fairly high for this corridor. And so that is a big focus of a system like this. There's a Jason's law, which kind of informs the safety analysis at the federal level that also plays into this. And then, part of it's that reducing emissions and the travel time spent searching for parking. And then there's also this kind of built environment aspect. A lot of the public infrastructure we're talking about here are ramps and shoulders, frontage or outer roads, and other unauthorized parking places that are being used because there's this lack of parking. And so being able to stop that infrastructure degradation by making sure that they can find safe and convenient and available parking is a part of that. And then they really want to focus on utilizing existing assets first before they build any new assets. Let's understand how those are being used and where we need to add that capacity, before we, add to the parking inventory that each state has. And so this is just sort of in a nutshell what the TPAS concept is. If you kind of look at step one there, it's all about kind of collecting the data. So the vehicle detection systems, they really measure the available truck parking in rest areas as they kind of either enter and exit the site or park in the spaces. And then once that data is collected, it goes to the states, or in some cases a third-party processor, where they compile and aggregate that data, and then it's disseminated out through various different communication channels to the end user, which in this case is the truck drivers or the dispatchers. And we try to do that through multiple platforms, and I'll talk about some of those platforms here in a minute. This one just represents a dynamic truck parking sign that they could see along their trip. As well as a state traveler information website where they can go and get information through things like 511. So I just wanted to highlight quickly just a couple of the different collection methods. And so it's not necessarily rocket science to do this, but it does have a more complicated algorithm behind it for some of these technologies than you think. And so one collection method is to do it on the entrance and exit ramps of different facilities. And a lot of these decisions just depend on the size of the lot, the layout of the lot, whether it has striped spaces, and just a whole bunch of different components. But some of the different types of technologies that can be used are in-pavement sensors. They can use video analytics. Radar and laser are becoming more popular as well. And so there's a whole host of different ways, and all of the different states involved in this may pick a different technology. So they don't necessarily have to use the same technology. It can be whatever's best for their particular situation. It just has to look seamless with the information being transmitted out and communicated to the end user in this case. If you go to the next slide, this one shows the other possible configuration, and that's to do space occupancy as the methodology instead. And you can see the yellow one here is in the spaces. And so here, they're not monitoring the entrance and exit, just the space occupancy, the space utilization. And so sometimes this type of technology works better when you have a smaller lot. It's a fairly expensive on the capital side of deploying this type of system. But on the operation side, it's much more seamless and very accurate. It's just a little bit more of a upfront cost to deploy, and it's better for smaller lots where it's very defined spaces. But they use some of the same similar technologies in those spaces, such as those sensors and video analytics. And so really what most of the states have decided at this point is, okay, am I an entrance and exit? Is my situation better that way? Or am I doing the space counting methodology with how I'm approaching it? And so the kind of data that's getting collected is, first and foremost, of course, it's the vehicle parking data to better understand, the trucks using the facilities. But it's also some other information, since we do have a public data feed that's getting created as a part of this. This information can be used in smartphone applications, other online applications, and in-cab navigation systems. And so it can also provide information on just some of the amenities they'd see along the corridor, such as, if they're looking for vending machines or Wi-Fi or restrooms, it'll tell them that kind of information. If private truck stops are involved, it can say the specific names and locations of private truck stops that are participating. In the Masto region, we do have a public-private kind of partnership going on where private truck stops are actually participating as well. And so that's some of the information collected. And this one just shows the different kind of data distribution and communication methods. And so we saw that dynamic truck parking sign, and we find from the trucking industry that they rely on that just because it's kind of instantaneous information, in the field as they're making and planning and driving their routes. But some of the other tools, depending on, there's a lot of rules and regulations related to using smartphones, in the vehicle, but there's in-cab integration systems. There are a lot of smartphone applications where private entities can take our public data feed, they can integrate it into their apps so that truck drivers are able to use things like Waze or Google or any of the apps they currently use. And this is just another layer of information for them. And so just to kind of wrap up and give you some ideas on the schedule, right now we're kind of entering the system design. So all the states are working on their procurement to get the design contracts underway to design the system. And then in 2022, they'll really be focused on the software development and integration of the information, as well as construction of the cameras and detectors and other signs and things that need to be in field. And then we'll be testing, and the system actually launches about mid-2023, and then it will be operational thereafter. So there's also a large kind of ongoing operation and maintenance component that all the states have to think about, and performance monitoring to make sure it's meeting the reliability and accuracy requirements that have been required of not only the grant, but also just the expectations of the end user. And so if you go to the next slide, I just kind of quickly summarized here some of the next steps that are happening. And so there is environmental documentation and clearance that goes on with the system. Again, I talked a little bit about design, but the big part of 2023, when they get into that, is really the testing period. And so this sort of joint testing of the system to make sure it's working seamlessly across that region. And then we have a lot of stakeholder engagement with state trucking associations, freight committees, owner-operator independent drivers associations, to make sure that as we're developing this TPAS, their user needs are met. And so those are some of the next steps and things that we've been working on. And if you go to the next slide, then I wanted to share just a little bit with what we're kind of hearing from the trucking industry. We've done a couple of electronic surveys with them. We've done some focus groups and interviews and some different activities just to better understand, to make sure if we build this, is it something that the trucking industry will use and value? Of course, we always hear first and foremost, additional truck parking capacity is always needed. And that's always going to be the priority for them. But they are aware of TPAS. They've used the Masto TPIM system over in the Midwest, or there's a system in Florida. So they're learning a lot from that, and they do see the value of this. They just need to make sure it's accurate and reliable. And then they prefer to get the information through those dynamic message signs, as well as some of the other smartphone and online applications. So we want to make sure we give them several different platforms to get that information. But we're kind of continuing to do outreach with the trucking industry, as we move closer to deployment of the system. And so with that, I just wanted to leave you with some of the ideas if you want to go out and see more information on this. We have quite a few different communication tools and strategies we're using. If you go to the i10connects.com website, you can get more information on this. You can see the results of the trucker survey and kind of keep pace with where we are at the points of the deployment. And so we'll be updating that as we go along. And then on the last slide, I left you some of the contacts. If you're interested, I wanted to make sure the state DOT contacts for each state was up here. Texas DOT is actually the lead agency for this particular project. Arizona is the lead agency for the coalition itself. And then of course, Matt Hansen from Caltrans is kind of the key contact from Caltrans, if you're interested specifically in the California portion. But with that, I will wrap up and reserve questions for later in the presentation.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. That was great. I have a ton of questions, and we have just one question here that was in the chat, and maybe I can share that and we can answer that one, and then we'll have time for additional Q&A at the end after all of the presentations. So we have one first question: is there consideration for a reservation system or the ability to mark "quote unquote" intended destination in the app to prevent too many drivers from aiming for an open parking lot?
Mm-hmm. That is definitely something that has been a big debate, as we go through about doing a reservation system. And so I would never say never. I would say this first initial deployment does not have a reservation system component, just because these are publicly available rest areas. And so sometimes there's a little more challenge with kind of, pre-assigning them or pre-reserving them for someone. And then there's the logistics of, if they don't show up, then what happens? And what if somebody takes their space, they show up and somebody's taken the spaces? So there's a lot of research, I think, going on around that topic right now. And you do see some private truck stops doing reservation systems today, sort of with some mixed results, but they are kind of diving into those waters. One other thing, Iowa DOT, we work with Iowa DOT as a part of the MASTO deployment I was talking about, and they're going to be doing a pilot of, it's not a reservation system, but it's a checkout system. And so rather than reserving a space, if they get there, they see an available space and they take it, they can kind of check it out, almost like a library book, and then check it back in when they're ready to leave. And so there is a lot of kind of research and pilots going on around the reservation angle, but not necessarily for this project at this point.
We have one other question, and then
Okay.
I feel like I should do it. And then again, we'll move on. So who will be responsible for maintaining the system after deployment, and how long will the maintenance be occurring?
Yeah, and that's always the big question too, because this isn't just it's not like a roadway or bridge project where you go and build it and then it kind of sits, they always need maintenance, but it is something that does need some form of daily operations. And so in this case, most of the states are doing the ongoing operations and maintenance themselves. They may have consultants that work in their traffic management centers and things like that will kind of help them with the ongoing operation and maintenance. But if you do pick a system like the entrance and exit counts I showed earlier, that does require daily resetting of the system through kind of a visual check with cameras, just to make sure it's staying accurate and reliable. There's a little less of an ongoing operation and maintenance component with the space occupancy detection, but they do all require some monitoring, and then there's this performance measures. And so right now they've agreed to kind of a 3-year after deployment operations and maintenance and performance measurement timeframe. And then after that, it's sort of dependent on ongoing funding and just how it fits into the overall kind of ITS plans for the DOTs. But the expectation is that it would go on for at least, I believe in the grant, it said a 10-year period. And then, there is the need to upgrade the technology about on every, 8 to 10 year cycle. And so probably they'd reevaluate at that time. Okay, is it something I want to continue forward? Do I need new technology equipment because of new advances? And so that's the thing about the technology. At some point, they do need to reevaluate. So it's kind of a good point at which to sort of reevaluate its effectiveness and the technology at the time.
All right. Thank you so much, Gretchen. That was very informative, and I know we're going to have many more questions for you as we move forward. Before we move to our next speaker, I would like to move on to our next poll. So our next speaker is Troy Musgrave, who will be speaking from the fleet perspective. And so getting us ready for that, thinking about what is the time frame, do you believe, for at least 50% of commercial fleets in the Inland Empire to transition to zero emission trucks? And then we have, of course, 5, 8, 10 years, and we have an other. And then our second question within this set of polls is, do you believe that businesses in the Inland Empire adapting more environmentally sustainable practices and good movements can also improve their bottom line? And many of you might know that there are state regulations that are kind of driving that first question. But so we have here 10 years is sort of the thought on the time frame to have at least 50%, which is, approximately around the time when the state mandate comes in. And then do you believe that businesses in the Inland Empire are adapting more environmentally sustainable practices? The majority said yes. So there can be a balance. And, it's some as well. Our second answer is do not know, because it does need to do that calculation. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. As we get our next speaker, invite him up, Troy Musgrave from Dependable Supply Chain Services. He is the Director of Process.
Thank you, Kimberly, and good morning, everyone. My name is Troy Musgrave. I'm the Director of Process Improvement for Dependable Highway Express, and I'm very happy to meet with you today. We are participants in a program called the Volvo LIGHTS program. LIGHTS is an acronym for Low Impact Green Heavy Transport Solution. It is part of a California Climate Investments and statewide initiative that puts billions of cap and trade dollars to work reducing greenhouse gas emissions, strengthening the economy, and improving public health and the environment, particularly in disadvantaged communities. There are 14 active members in this coalition, including Volvo Trucks, South Coast AQMD, obviously Dependable Highway Express, NFI Industries, Tech Equipment, Green Lots, Port of Long Beach, and the Port of Los Angeles, Southern California Edison, CalSTART, University of California at Riverside, Reach Out, Rio Hondo College, and the San Bernardino Valley College. The idea of bringing these very diverse partners together were to enable us to create an environment that surrounds elite fleet electrification and would help, with its success. Our role in this project is to demonstrate battery electric trucks and its supporting equipment throughout our supply chain to demonstrate that we can move our freight goods on these types of vehicles. Some, as I mentioned, there are different type vehicles, and some are more mature than others. Electric drive forklifts, as you see here, are have a long history in our industry. However, in our type of business, have been less productive in terms of efficiency when it comes to fueling and maintaining. So we always selected the propane-driven forklifts. However, today's technology with lithium-ion batteries and zero maintenance batteries that are, like opportunity charging, have shown that they're very good as far as being able to support our duty cycles and, doing the tasks that the propane equivalents were doing. So these have really shown us to be vehicles that we can use in place of these petroleum fuel vehicles. And we're in our first year with these vehicles, and so far it's looking like we can expand our use of these types of vehicles. The common barriers currently are still price of the vehicles and the infrastructure. The price of the vehicles are very high. Basically, the batteries cost as much as the vehicles themselves. And obviously, infrastructure needs to be installed to support them as well. Another mature market, not as mature as electric driven forklifts, is the yard tractors. This vehicle is used to pull our trailers into and away from the dock, and position equipment throughout the yard for drivers so that they can hook up easily and go on their trips. We purchased 2 of these in our project and replaced the 2 diesel equivalents. And in the 22 months that we've been operating them, we estimate a savings on fuel and maintenance of combined on the 2 to be in the neighborhood of $140,000. In the Class 8 space, we are working with 4 electric vehicles currently, 1 box truck shown here, and 3 tractors in the background. These are run daily. They work Monday through Friday, and they're sent out on regional routes. The limitations that we are trying to work with and compromise on how we use these vehicles are range. These vehicles currently are ranged at about 100 miles before they need an additional charge, and their payload capacities are less than the diesel equivalents. The box truck here, for example, payload capacity is 8,800, and the diesel box truck, you can see it in the background, the white ones, those are able to carry a payload of 15,000 pounds. So there's quite a bit of difference, but the good news is manufacturers understand this, and they are working to design trucks that we hope to see in the very near future that will have a range of 200 plus miles and carry a payload of 12,500 pounds. That's our target. But what I think is important to know, there are applications for the current technology today, and I advocate for making sure that we electrify those units today and not wait any longer. One, because of the impact that they have on our supply chain and the impact we have on our climate. I think doing something is better than doing nothing. These trucks are reliable, and they can perform the duties if they're sized right. Infrastructure is a complicated subject. There are so many stakeholders when you start thinking about infrastructure. Design, how is the end user going to use them, space for the infrastructure. All this is just the start. Then there's permits and applications to be filed with utilities. There are just so many stakeholders to try to get everybody together and then start construction. When construction's taking place, you're trying to still operate your business. It's not only the area where the infrastructure is going to be installed, but also all the equipment and materials that need to be staged for the equipment, while they're setting it all up. There's a great deal of time to take to this. Our program started in March of 2019, and we actually powered our chargers in January of 2021. So, there's considerable amount of time for infrastructure to be planned and involved. I think one of the most, one area that I really am invested in and I see as being one of our best step forward is really talking about distributed energy resources and how they play a role in fleet electrification. You know, in our project, again, part of what we committed to was working with our partners and installing a solar system that you see here and a battery storage system. You know, these types of things we did on our side with our project partners, where I think there's a great opportunity for government agencies like CARB and Southern California AQMD to work directly with utilities to set up and maintain these types of systems so that fleets can continue to be fleet operators and not energy management resources. They're better equipped for it, and I think they could do a much more efficient job with it. As part of our project, we also introduced a battery or energy storage system, the one you see on the left, which was designed for mitigation. Our goal was to mitigate demand charges on our EV meter side. What it turned out, working with our utility, we were allowed an EV pass on demand charges for our EV side for a period of time. So we switched our mitigation to energy arbitrage. Basically, we collect energy when we overproduce solar, so we charge the battery with 100% renewable energy. And when solar production declines and ends for the day, the battery system then discharges its energy to mitigate grid pull. You know, so we use this as an example, and I'll show you how it kind of works in a graph in a minute. To the right, you'll see a larger battery system. It's batteries that are this size for things like microgridding. Microgrids, in my limited knowledge, but seem to offer the best solution, again, for utilities to come in and set up distributed energy resources with battery storage systems that would allow for resilient backup in the event of power outage to the fleet. You know, because if we electrify the entire fleet and then there's a power outage, we'll have limited reserves and our capacity will be greatly diminished to move goods. As you see, well, we need it for the dock, we need it to be able to move it, our forklifts, we need the yard tractors to work, and we also need the trucks to work to make our supply chain functional. So managing energy, there's a lot to it. This is an example of what our system is doing. And you can see in the green area where solar production is taking place. And the blue in the lower section is solar production going to the grid after it's already covered the gray area, which is the pull, pull from the grid. And in the center, you can see the orange area where the battery is charging during solar generation. And to the right of the center, in the orange, you can see where the battery is discharging after solar production is diminished. So it's a small system, but it's a great example of how distributed energy resources, and I use that instead of solar because it's really important to size up the region where the fleet is going to be deployed to determine what are the best renewable energy sources in that area. I know of projects that combine wind and solar and geothermal. So again, the region is very important. What renewable energy sources are best suited for the region? You know, it's our goal that someday, you know, we will have a freight facility that is 100% zero emissions. I think Dependable Highway Express has taken the necessary steps to learn about fleet electrification and how we can work with partners throughout the industry and, you know, achieve this very lofty goal, but one that's very worthwhile. Thank you very much for allowing me to share with you today.
Thank you so much, Troy. That was great. Again, I have a ton of questions, but we'll save those for the end. Question for you before we move on to our next speaker. And so quickly, do you think that COVID-19 has sped up or slowed down innovation in the goods movement industry? Now, just to share the results, it's kind of a mixed bag here. So sped up 10, so 48%, slowed down 38%, and then we have neither. So thank you for that. Second, please, and we'll bring up our next speaker. We have Leonard Brown who's the VP of Strategy and Marketing at Quantum Computing, to share a bit of what they are working on right now. So Rebel, welcome.
So I'm going to take you a little bit into the future today, all right? I wanted to talk about quantum computing, and it is the next. I've been in the computing business for over 30 years now, working with venture capitalists as a consultant. And I have to tell you, this is one of the most exciting bleeding edge technologies I've ever seen. And it is going to massively change how we look at our supply chains, logistics, et cetera, over time as it comes to its fruition. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about, you know, what's going on and where we can go and what's coming. Okay. So welcome to the jungle, you guys. And you all live in the jungle, right? You live in this jungle that is, everything is complex, right? You've got to get goods from suppliers to manufacturers through the distribution centers out to wherever it's supposed to go. You've seen it increase and increase again and again. Can you hit the next slide, please? As we've experienced it was complex enough, right? Then everything changed. And the first change was e-commerce, because e-commerce came along and all of a sudden people started, instead of buying a large shopping basket in the store, they started buying off of Amazon or Walmart. And now, and I'm guilty of it too, I go, oh, I forgot to buy that. And I go buy one thing and stick it in a box and it's another shipping opportunity, right? And I go buy another one and another one. So you went from large volume of goods in a lower volume of baskets to a high volume of baskets with low number of goods, which increased and accelerated the number of orders, the number of deliveries, et cetera, right? At the same time, customers started expecting things to be delivered immediately, right? And as a matter of fact, there was a study that 74% of customers believe that immediate delivery is the reason that they will buy something from somebody, that it has to be within 24 hours. So that increases trucks, et cetera. Then we had COVID and supply chains come along, right? We had COVID and all of the supply chains got hung up. And now we have an even more complicated transportation thing, which is, it's dynamic, it's changing. We never know what's going to happen. We have trucks running, we have things running that are, you know, oh, we missed this, so we got to go send that. We missed this, so we've got to go send that. The result has been our efficiency is lower, our costs are higher. And as we all know, living in California, we have more trucks on the road, right? More and more trucks, which translates into money for roads, money for government, money, and not exactly the quality of life, that we all want as we go through these corridors where there's trucks everywhere. Now, part of the challenge is that we can't solve all of these optimizations today, all right? Because to optimize a complex supply chain logistics gets more and more complex the more truck deliveries we have, the more dependent we become on the supply chain, right? So this is just a few little facts. So the growth in demand, all right, the transportation planners, that last mile delivery, we've had 154% compound annual growth in same day delivery requirements thanks to COVID. 150% year over year, and it's increasing into next year. So think about how many more trucks that puts on the road, or how much more complex it makes our optimization decisions. All right. So, and here's just a little sample I found. As destination increase, right? As you have more destinations, your complexity of routing the transportation increases. And this blew me away. And we work a lot in this market, but this number blew me away. With only 15 destinations, if you only have to go to 15 destinations, the number of possible routes can exceed 86 billion routes. If you look at all the options in a dense metropolitan area. So how do you pick the best route, right? Now imagine the impact on that of rapid delivery. Everything's got to be done, but I've got supply chains that are backed up in the LA port, right? I've got things that are having to be transported across multiple routes that may be backed up due to more trucks, due to construction, due to building out the roads, et cetera, et cetera. So we get into these really complex situations where we need to optimize how we're loading the trucks, how we're routing the trucks, who's driving them, et cetera. But our ways of doing that today are falling behind, all right? Classic computers, many of the computers we use today are running out of gas on large optimization problems, right? You talk to some of our customers that are, and we're going to talk about a couple of case studies. There's computers cannot process the computations to optimize the loading of trucks in the time they have to be able to load the trucks every morning. All right. And not only that, it's not just computers. We're also talking to people. I mean, they've gotten by with doing their optimizations with spreadsheets, even with sticky notes. An exceedingly large manufacturer that you would all know and love, if I talk to you about them, used sticky notes to optimize up until about 2 years ago. And then they realized they couldn't do it anymore. And now they're working with us to figure out how to use quantum techniques on computers, but also move into quantum computing, right? The other problem is, so they're running out of time and they can't solve them, or they can't solve them in the time frame, the problems. But the other thing is that you only get one option with our computing systems today. So you get what's known as the optimal optimization. So this is the optimal route for or optimal loading sequence, or whatever you're doing with your trucking, right? The challenge is that, there may be routing that's off by 0.001 in the math calculations. And yet, your situation while the computer was running it, your situation changed, and you don't get the opportunity to see that. You only see one answer, right? So what it results in, again, is less efficiency, higher costs, more missed deliveries, and more trucks on the road, right? More trucks on the road, and that's what we're all trying to solve. Because if we solve that problem, a lot of the other things get easier to solve, right? So now I want to talk about how quantum optimization can help, all right? And then we're going to talk a little bit more about quantum computing, all right? So first of all, quantum computers run differently than classical computers, all right? So they are designed to actually simulate the real world, whereas classical computers kind of do a search to do pattern matching to look for things. Quantum computers actually simulate what happens if I route this way, or what happens if I load the trucks this way, and they give you the result, all right? So you get better optimization, and we'll talk about that specifically in a minute. But what that means to you, because they're faster, because they're accurate, give you more and better answers. You're going to see less trucks on the road. You're going to get rid of the fire drills we talked about before, this added load. The other thing they promise to do is if they even will eliminate some of the routes you're running today, right? The compression, we actually did some work on an optimization problem for a large auto manufacturer. And they thought that they had a number of, let's say it was 300, right? That they thought they had to use 300 cars to be able to do what they needed to do in their assembly line, we reduced it to 200. That's a third reduction. Think about what that would do if you could reduce a third of the number of trucks on a road today. That's significant, right? So you think it's, sometimes you think of a third as not that much, but when you run it out to large numbers, it's a big deal. Even 10% is a big deal. So that's what you have the potential of with quantum computing. So here's a little overview of why quantum computing is going to be so great. All right. So today's computers run in what we call a two-dimensional model, which means they run in a binary space and they look through all the data and they basically look for patterns to match in pairs. All right. A quantum computer actually runs like nature does. And if you get into quantum computing, you'll hear all these strange terms like superposition and entanglement and all this other stuff. What it basically means is the way the world works around you in 3 dimensions. If you make a choice, there's impacts to that choice, right? There's consequences from that choice. That's what a quantum computer does. It models choices to show you the outcomes and the various outcomes and simulates them in real world space. So for example, if I have to load all of these things and I optimize it, that means I'm going to get this result and I'm going to get this kind of loading, this kind of routing, etc. If I change one dimension, here's going to be the impact flow through all of that. If I change another dimension, it does that in real time, instantaneously, so that we can actually look and go, oh, cause and effect. Oh, this gives me my best opportunity. We can't do that today with classical computers. All right. And as a result, these computers deliver far better performance, time to the result. And they also promise to solve problems that we can't even run today. They will be able to model complexity that we can't even fathom today in our markets. We can't fathom solving. We have it, but we just don't have a way to solve it. They also, because of the way they run, classical computers do really well, but they make assumptions about pairing and matching and what's real, etc. Quantum computers actually model it and simulate it in real time so that they actually see the actual results and are more accurate than anything else out there. So they're going to give us more accurate answers. And they also, instead of just giving you one answer that says, this is mathematically the best answer for your problem, they give you a diversity of results that all meet your problem constraints. So they deliver what you've asked for, but they're, maybe the math's off by, like I said, 0.01, 0.001. They deliver all of that diversity of answers so that you can look at them and say, well, wait a minute. The optimal answer is good, but this one that's just a little different in the math is better for me because it meets the constraints of my current scenario, right? I had a change and now I have a truck that's down and I need to do that really quickly. I can do that with this answer, right? So you just get to view more options for you to be able to get the best answer possible. And the bottom line is, it is next generation optimization for today and tomorrow. All right. Now, quantum computers are not ready to solve these kinds of problems. And I've worked in bleeding edge tech for decades. I've never seen a market quite so overhyped. All right. All the vendors are out there. And if you read them, you'd think they were running today and solving today. They're solving small problems today. They haven't scaled big enough to solve big, huge, complex problems yet. However, there are companies like my company that are applying quantum techniques and modeling to the way classical processors run today to make the classical processors get better results, more accurate results, and deliver a diversity of results. We're also working on things that are called hybrids, which means you have a quantum computer and a classical computer working together. And they divide the workload up so that the quantum assists the classical where it has problems and can't solve. And the classical does what it does well, working for the quantum computer. So we're starting to get results today. We're just not anywhere close to a pure quantum world yet. All right. So there are ways to use quantum and learn about quantum. It's just not ready for prime time for full production problems on its own yet, but we're getting there. So if you look at the next slide, I want to talk about a couple of examples. So one of our customers is a trucking company that actually they contract with another extremely large federal agency that delivers billions of pieces of paper every day to people's mailboxes. Oops, I wasn't, right? So, you know, the customer, the federal customer loads the containers. They determine the routes and the specific time windows for the destination for the delivery. But then our trucking company has to take that, and in real time, they have to determine the rigs and the drivers that are spread across the United States. And the way they win the business is by optimizing the costs of the trucks and the ability to meet the delivery timeframes. All right. And they had not been able to do that in an effective way. And they're working with us. And we're actually in the process of running the systems and running the computations to find out where they are. But we've already seen results that are reducing their costs, optimizing their delivery times, and they believe that they're going to be able to have a better chance at continuing to hold on to this very significant contract because of what we're doing with them. All right. Now, there's another company that's a very large, well-known consumer goods company. They have the problem of they have to load 1,000 trucks with 1,000 orders in over 100 locations of 1,000 trucks in under 4 hours. All right. It's a tight loading window. They can't meet it. So they end up missing deliveries, missing loads, missing things, and they have to send out extra trucks all the time. The red lines we talked about before. All right. Their challenge is that they can't optimize, if they can't get the loads optimized. So even though they have 1,000 trucks, they have like 10% trucks more on order on standby every day because they can't meet it. So what we're working with them is to be able to load those trucks more efficiently so that they can stay within the 1,000 and not have to bring the extra 100 on board. But they also want to reduce that 1,000 because they think they can take that down. So we're working on being able to help them more efficiently load and pack, and routing and truck optimization so that they are putting less trucks on the road. With 1,000 trucks out of 100 distribution centers, if you can drop that by 10%, think of the impact of that on the trucking and on the roads and on every state they pass through, on the overhead costs on the consumers, et cetera. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing with them today. And we'll be doing more and more in that in the future. So that's a little overview of quantum computing. I'd love to I can take questions now, or we can take questions later if you have any.
Thanks so much, Rebel. That was great. And we could take questions now if anybody would have one question, or we can, of course, take them at the end. All right. So let's move on. Before our last speaker for today, move on to our next poll. So our next question is, how do we increase cooperation among all the stakeholders, business, government, and nonprofits? And this one, it'd be great if you could either raise your hand or put it into the chat for us. There was really difficulty in thinking about how do we get our closed question, our set question here for you. So how can we increase cooperation among all the stakeholders, business, government, and nonprofits in the logistics industry? I'd like to go back to one of our original questions and thinking about the sharing of information and making sure that we have mechanisms by which to share information between the private sector and the public sector. Another is how could MPOs play a bigger part in organizing, coordinating efforts with other MPOs. Of course, we know that that we have SCAG within this region, the Southern California Association of Governments, and for the Southern California region, we also have SANDAG working down in the San Diego area. So many ways in thinking about how can we really share that information and make sure that we are, again, providing all the best that we have from the public and the private and the nonprofits to make it work. Carrie, you wanted to share one piece?
I just wanted to respond to your question, how do we get the stakeholders involved? And I think the key across the board, both public and private and everyone else, is to really define the value proposition, to say what's in it for me if I get involved in some of these efforts to streamline or to use data or whatever the proposition is. I think the message has to be, and here's what's in it for you if you do that. And so, whether it's a private whether it's a technology developer, like we just heard from, or anyone else. I think they need to define the value that would entice others to participate.
All right, thank you so much, Carrie. Always great with the comment there. Other pieces we have here, a similar system to the FAA and private airlines and other aviation sectors, cooperation via regulation, more collaboration, commitment, so more collaboration and commitment among major stakeholders, and the public sector will need to develop processes to respond quickly to the needs of the private sector. Otherwise, the private sector will not be incentivized to prioritize time for coordination with public partners. All great pieces. Thank you so much for participating in that piece. Now I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Mario Orso, who's the Project Corridor Director from Caltrans District 11, of course, our friends down in the San Diego region. There we go.
Here we are. Let's go to the next slide. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit with you guys about State Route 11, Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project, but it's also a little bit of how it connects to the discussions today of goods movement. And I'll give you a brief overview about the border, the project, and just tell you how we're thinking the same things, right? Technology, appointment services, all the things, electrification, all the things that have been discussed. We're in the same boat, right? So the Baja California border has 7 ports of entry that you could see here. 2 of them are heavy freight crossings, Calexico East in Imperial County, and our biggest gateway with Baja California and California's biggest gateway with Mexico, the Otay Mesa Port of Entry. We are proposing the Otay Mesa East, which will be a complement in the San Diego, Tijuana region. Something that's interesting topic, in the southern border between US and Mexico, there's only one area where 2 major metropolitan cities in both sides of the border join, which is Tijuana and San Diego. In all the other borders, there's a big city on one side and a smaller city in the other. In example, Mexicali is a metropolitan area, and Imperial County is a smaller area there, and it goes around the entire border region. Why is it important? Mexico is the biggest US trading partner and California's biggest export market, and it's also biggest importing overall partner as a country. So how do we connect to the Inland Empire, right? So our goods cross through either Calexico or the Otay Mesa. They go and get either sometimes processed through warehouses in the Otay Mesa or Imperial County area. And then they could either be shipped to warehouses in the Inland Empire, and then it goes to the final destination. Sometimes they go to final destinations from the border, they go to the ports, or they can be loaded like you're seeing into the rail system again in the Inland Empire, because San Diego has a very limited rail line, the LOSAN, the Los Angeles San Diego line, and freight only travels at night in that line. And one of our major commodities is the Toyota Tacomas that are built in Tijuana, going up north. So that's how we connect. We also have the San Diego port, but we also are looking into, the ports of Long Beach and San Diego, and also take into consideration that down south, Baja California has the Ensenada Port of Entry that sometimes has been used to bypass the LA port when there's congestion there, like it's happening right now. So right now, Ensenada is also at capacity because of those items. This is a cool video.
The Otay Mesa Port of Entry is the busiest commercial vehicle crossing in California and Mexico. More than 1.4 million commercial vehicles crossed northbound in 2019. That same year, the Otay Mesa and Tecate ports of entry processed a combined $65.86 billion in total bilateral trade value. And these numbers are rising. The increased demand at San Diego's land ports of entry significantly impact border wait times. Today, passenger vehicle wait times can reach up to 3 to 6 hours during peak times, while commercial vehicles may wait even longer. This congestion directly impacts the movement of freight and goods throughout the region, hurting our local economy. Border delays at Baja California land ports of entry result in an estimated $3.4 billion in lost economic output each year, leading to more than 88,000 lost jobs. Without additional port of entry enhancements, border delays will result in more than 97,000 jobs lost and an estimated economic loss of over $5 billion by 2025, the equivalent of revenue earned from 37 Comic-Con conventions. That's why Caltrans and Sandag have made the State Route 11 Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project a priority for our cross-border region. This project brings critical infrastructure and investment to the San Diego, Baja California region. On opening day, wait times will be decreased by up to 50% at all California land ports of entry, promoting the economic competitiveness of California by improving the movement of freight and goods. It will strengthen economies on both sides of the border, resulting in more than $1 billion in savings annually and delivering a 10-to-1 return on investment for the San Diego region. The construction and operation of the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry will also create jobs, including customs and facility maintenance officers and specialized positions that support the ITS function. The State Route 11 Otay Mesa East Port of Entry is a transformative priority project that aligns with the vision of the 2021 Regional Plan and offers real solutions for a brighter, healthier, and more prosperous future for the U.S. and Mexico.
We didn't want to put in that added excitement of the system
Otay
off. So it was just technology as it going. Again, a little bit more about the border, and before we dive into the project itself, you know, the economic benefits that are calculated just by freight for the U.S. is a combined $21 billion for California and an additional $32.3 billion of economic output for the rest of the country. So it's not just for California, and you know that. For Mexico, it's equivalent. I would jump a little bit to the jobs generated, you know, just the freight movement that crosses the Baja California ports of entry supports about 230,000 jobs in the U.S. and about 3 million jobs in Mexico. That gives you also the order of magnitude of the sizes of the manufacturing plants, the agricultural groups that are crossing. And I highlight the agricultural because those are areas of opportunities also that I will touch a little bit in a second. Just going to benefits, again, it was mentioned in the video, but 50% reduction of peak hours at the entire border crossings, an integrated system. That is something very important that we all in this panel have been saying in different words. We need to integrate the system. The systems need to talk to each other. Technology needs to talk to each other. Origins and destinations need to talk to each other. That's something very key. And we're trying to do here that in up to a point, right? That's one of the challenges that we have, but also the benefits that this project brings. It has helped us visualize that challenge, that problem statement, and the next operating system for the region is based on what we learn looking at how we can integrate all the ports of entry as well as the supply chain. So that's something pretty cool that we've been able to adopt from the studies and the analysis on this project for the rest of the region. So what is Otay Mesa East? Otay Mesa East, State Route 11, is a corridor project that we learned that you need to have a system, again, not just above the ports of entry, but the transportation system leading to the ports. It could be an airport, it could be a seaport, it could be a distribution center. But if you don't have the arteries to that heart, you're not going to go well. And so we learned that we needed to develop an appropriate transportation system leading to the port of entry itself, as well as on the Mexican side with our partners. So this project just on the US side is a little bit shy of $1 billion. We have invested $565 million into it. Basically, all the transportation facilities are either done or are under construction. And we're really laser focused on delivering the port of entry. Our partners in Mexico are in the same tune. The current funding, $565 million, you could see the split here of that funding sources. So everybody has put in their share, the state, the federal government, and the local government via SANDAC. Technology is key on this project. Again, I can't stop stressing what everybody has been talking about, either from the I-10 or from electrification or quantum computers. It's all integrating all those different elements and bringing technology, developing a border wait time system that does not exist, developing an appointment system for the border similar to the rest areas. It's something that's key to reduce emissions and make it more efficient. So we're looking into those items, and we probably should be partnering among all of us in developing that. Again, this is the technology. An added layer of interest in this project is in the polls we've discussed regulations, private sector investment, willingness to change, right? That's now duplicated by 2 with the Mexican government, because we're working with the Mexican government and they have the same demons we have, or the same challenges, let's put it that way. We have a federal government that resists change and wants to do everything the way it was used to be done, a state government with regulations, a local governments with regulations, and in a timid private sector knowing when to go in or not. So same with ITS, right? And same in this project. We're doubling it because we're dealing with a foreign government that has the same challenges. And for this project to work, it's going to take both sides of the country to match and do the things that we want and aspire. We've done a joint concept of operations. Mexico is designing this facility. The highway will be tolled, dynamically tolled, to guarantee or strive to that 20 to 25 minute border wait time. Why do I say that? Because the reliability of the entire freight network it's important. And I think it's not just at the border. It's distributors want to know when they can get to point A or B, or have some sort of an idea. And congestion is sometimes one of those impediments that requires companies to add more fleets or more trucks to their fleets just to be able to respond. So this is key. These are just some pictures showing you the different connectors that are being built currently. So this is $565 million. It's not chump change. So we're investing serious money in the infrastructure. This is where State Route 11 ends, and we are now starting the port of entry. And what you see as a brown line at the end there, that is the border. That is the wall. And on the other side, you could see Tijuana as a major metropolitan area where several manufacturing plants are just abutting the border. So that's what we are focused next, building that port of entry. Like I said, we are finished with the transportation facilities, but bigger picture, we're learning a lot of things that are applicable to the Inland Empire or to the border. We're learning the integration of the system. We're learning how to figure out technology. We're learning how to partner with the private sector, not just on electrification, but maybe services within the port of entry, like refrigeration services for those agricultural products that are crossing and have normally final destination, the LA produce market. This is a video, and just because I'm an engineer, I'm a nerd. And innovation is required also because of the large demand of trucks. You could see at the top of this picture, this is a video, that's Amazon. They just built a about 3.4 million square foot distribution center. That building, that's that size, is the biggest commercial building in San Diego. But they're also building 4 more buildings around this one to act as the first and last mile distribution or support centers to this center. They also just built a new distribution center in Tijuana. So this is a diverging diamond in SR11 that we had to build. This is the first one in San Diego and in District 11. And let's get the video. To be able to account, because this same road takes all the traffic coming currently from Mexico. So we had to do a diverging diamond, which is a interchange that moves the traffic to the opposite way. So suddenly when you're taking the ramps into the state highway system for a truck, you are basically taking a free left instead of a free right. So you're like in England. You go, why is he showing me this? Well, it required a lot of technology. It required a lot of coordination, and it required an acknowledgement that just one intersection could be the impediment of Amazon or our international business with Mexico. So sometimes smaller things can help out. In a compendium, it makes a better system for the freight network. So this is a sim of the Otay Mesa East. We're proposing a smaller port of entry at opening day, but we are setting 120 acres. So that's bigger than Disneyland, and it's bigger than the San Isidro port of entry and the Otay port of entry together. San Isidro being the busiest land port of entry in the Western Hemisphere, and Otay Mesa our largest commercial or busiest commercial crossing. So we're building for the future. We are not building a port of entry to its maximized size, but by having the tolling authority being Sandac, by partnering with Mexico and sharing the tolls, and by working together with the federal government, the state, and the locals, we're creating a process and a system here, or setting the table so we can grow either with technology or physically brick and mortar this port of entry in the entire 21st century, because we don't have any more space to build in another port of entry between Tijuana and San Diego. So this is the livelihood, right? We have so many jobs pending south of the border and north of the border, but we need to get them through the border system that we have. So we know trucks are essential, and they will continue to be essential. We're also looking into rail, but it's a compendium. It's not going to be one single element. So this is a view of what we're proposing for opening day. We have finished a traffic and revenue study, investment grade, and we have just submitted an application to TIFIA, to the Build America Bureau, to begin the financing, as well as we're working with our Mexican partners to do the agreements that are required to share the revenues, because the tolls will be collected on the U.S. for both Mexico and the U.S. I know I'm saying so many things, and I'll be open for questions. So what's next? I said we're focused on the port of entry, laser focus. We are beginning the site preparations. Those who are in the contracting business, we will be putting out some contracts by next year. We are working on a bridging document to design the port of entry and the highway patrol facility. That's a way station. And we are working on the ITS elements, owner's rep contract that just got put out. So we are, like I said, laser focused. We are partnering with Mexico. It requires 2 to tango on this project. So that's another complicated piece, working at the same pace, or pushing our Mexican partners to work faster, or they push us to work faster in other areas. Like I mentioned, Mexico is key. We just signed a memorandum of understanding. In this picture, you can see our Lieutenant Governor, our Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Kim, as well as the Mayor of San Diego, with Mexican stakeholders and the chair of the Sandac board. In this agreement, we agreed to have a mirror ITS system on both sides, and we're working on that. We agreed to share the toll revenues with one single toll location. We are developing a joint binational financing strategy. And the biggest thing is we're striving to open this facility by September 2024, which is huge and it's very ambitious. But if you don't drive a stake on the ground, you keep talking about the project. So a good friend that some of you may know or may not in the freight industry, Tina Kasker, taught me that. And she was a great mentor to me. And she said, Mario, you need to put it on paper and draw a stake on the ground and then let it happen or not. So we are striving for that. So the next steps are agreements with the federal government. We are developing the financial strategy. We are designing the port of entry on the US side with CBP watching us and giving us their input, as well as the Mexican partners. And we are doing all the utility and site preparation and relocations. And we have submitted the letter to TIFIA, and we will begin getting ratings in the near future. Once we align all those elements that are in place, we will begin the construction. We will materialize the funding for the construction phase, and we're striving to begin that late next year. And I think that's it. I think we have the calendar, but that's too much detail. It's again, the end of 2024 is our goal to open this facility. And again, I think from this chat that we have had today, it's integrating the system, looking at technology, thinking outside the box, and thinking that we can do it, that we can fit a square in a circle or a circle in a square. And we have to think that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mario, for that. And sorry on the video playing it. I couldn't find the start button. All right, we have one more poll for you, and then really quick, then to move into our time for question and answers. And I know we're going to have many of them. So our final 3 questions for you. What are the principles and strategies for establishing efficient, effective, and sustainable transportation options? You have a number of answers there. Infrastructure development, the built environment. Of course, it's all of our speakers today. Advanced computing, big data, industry leadership and implementation of zero emissions, public-private partnerships, or all of the above. Or if you have an other, please share. Our second question here is, do you see any adverse effects or externalities to innovation in the goods movement sector? If you have a yes or no, and if you'd like to explain, please raise your hand or put your ideas in the chat. And then our final question is, which innovations are you most excited about? The built environment, quantum computing, zero emission fleets, or zero emission fleets and renewable energy efficiency infrastructure? I think I got that wrong. Anyways, or if you have another one, please put it down. All right. And sharing our results. So all of the above, of course, in thinking about that first piece of principles and strategies. We need all of these pieces working together to make them go. And then any adverse effects, a greater yes than we have as a no. And then the innovations they're most excited about, the built environment, the zero emission fleets, and the infrastructure. All right, thank you all for sharing that. And then I'd like to now open it up for discussion. So Victoria shared with us that one of the possible negative externalities could be more traffic with more goods moving through the system. Greg also had another piece on locally sessions such as this one on the agendas of Mobility 21 SCAG and other MPO annual meetings. We need to focus on the future should be helpful. Raising the issues and opportunities for the California Transportation Commission might also be helpful. And the private sector part must be part of it. And thinking about private sector leadership as well as part of this. Okay, again, any questions for our speakers? Gretchen I had, and Gretchen as well as Troy, if you're there. And adding in, I guess, also Mario, because I saw you had a grid kind of, that looked like was the last piece on the zero emissions build out. So with these new truck stops, are there plans, Gretchen, to have a zero emissions or microgrids built into the truck stops? And then how is that going to be working at the SR, or the Otay 2 or Otay East port of entry? If they're going to be charging facilities? And then Troy, if you had any reflection on the I-10 build out, or looking at the new port facility and the toll roads that are in there, that would be great. So Gretchen, if you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, for the I-10 Corridor Coalition, since it's funded through a specific federal grant related to the TPAS deployment, it doesn't cover that. But I do know, Texas is doing its own, statewide implementation of different truck parking improvements. I think California is thinking of doing something similar. So within some of those, we're leaving sort of flexibility for private innovations to come into the truck parking sites. And so it's not an impossibility. We're trying to kind of think about what's next from a technology standpoint, whether it's electric vehicle charging or things related to the zero emissions, things related to connected and autonomous vehicles that might be needed, and leaving flexibility in how we're developing some of these new parking sites just to be able to accommodate it, when it comes, or depending on what comes. And so it's not necessarily a part of the funding and the grant that's happening for TPAS, but it is something that as they're thinking about reconfiguring or adding new facilities, what are some of the next amenities or basic requirements that need to be out there, or at least in the discussion.
All right, thank you so much. Mario, any
Well, I think, I hear Gretchen and she's talking about the same challenges we have, at the border. It's exactly the same problem, right? It's a supply chain, and we have also truckers coming in. So we are looking at electrification and rest areas, appointment areas also for holding up and making an appointment to the border. I think that's where the partnership with the private sector is going to be key. And she also mentioned that those additional amenities, I think is going to be our next step as we're starting to design the port of entry. CBP is looking at their technology for safety and national security, but we're also looking at what would make it a better experience in crossing the border, right? And fill the needs that they have, the industry has.
All right, thank you. And Troy, any thoughts on either project would be great.
Well, I thought it was very informative what Gretchen pointed out about drivers looking for places to park. Our drivers use the I-10 corridor nightly to commute between Southern California and Arizona. And, having a safe and secure location where they can park and get that rest that they're needed, and being able to be informed ahead of time where that might be so that they can plan it, certainly, adds value to what we're doing. I can attest to the fact that our drivers are parking at times in unauthorized parking areas. We also do operations where we meet and turn. In other words, a driver from Arizona would be meeting with a driver from Southern California at a central point, and they need safe, secure areas where they can exchange equipment and take their rest breaks. So, adding those additional places and having availability electronically so that they can plan, I think is an excellent first step.
I know we had also a question for Revel, and it's the same question I have as well. And thinking about what is the timeline for quantum computing to really be fully on the market and ready to go. Have any?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think, if you read the hype, everybody, you'll expect that, there's going to be pure quantum and we're going to be running pure quantum machines. That's not what we believe. In fact, quantum computers are really good at modeling and doing things that are complicated, but using one, for example, for supply chain as a standalone is not really the best opportunity. All right. Where they're going to function is in a hybrid model. Classical computers do really well doing optimization on simple data. All right. Where they bog down is when you have what's called a dense matrix, which basically means if you ever look at an X and Y spreadsheet, if every cell is filled in, that's a dense matrix. If random cells are filled in, it's a sparse matrix. Classical does really well on sparse matrix, and quantum does really well on dense matrix kind of computations. So what we're building with our software is the ability to be able to use a hybrid. First of all, what we're building in our software is right now we can solve problems better and faster. All right, with the machines we have today, with classical computers. The next step is adding a quantum to assist that, so that the quantum helps direct the classical computer to find better answers, to go to the right places, to seek out and deliver better performance and more accurate answers. And we believe that's where quantum's going to play. We're beginning, the classical's available today, and we are getting the better results in accuracy. The hybrids we're starting to do technology demos with, but our belief is we're going to see the beginning of what we call production value, which means I can actually solve the full problem of a production environment, a large production environment, starting probably in 2023 into 2024. So this year we're doing technology demos. We have a couple of technology demos. We're working with Amazon Web Services. Next year, we're starting to actually do hybrid technology proof of concepts with customers. And the year after, we'll start to actually see some production work. And once again, it depends. If you're if you're in a smaller environment, one of the things that's interesting about our software is we run on Amazon on the cloud with both the quantum as well as the classical. So you can literally get in there and start experimenting today. And if you have a smaller type of problem, instead of 1,000 trucks, it's 100 trucks, you're going to be able to use quantum sooner, right? Because it's all about the scale of the processors and how much data they can take in. They don't use databases. A quantum computer takes in all the data to itself. So they have to scale big enough to manage the size of the problem. So if you've got a smaller problem, you're going to get to quantum ability sooner than you are if you've got a massively complex problem. But that's why the hybrids come in. So that's a long-winded answer, but it does depend on your problem. You can get some value today with quantum techniques. Next year, you'll start to see production, small problem production results. 2023, 2024, you're going to start seeing that larger hybrid systems evolve. Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're excited to see that roll out. Are there other questions? I can continue going, but we have some time for some more questions from someone else. Well, and I'm going to have another question now, and each of you could possibly answer this in thinking about how do we create greater collaboration within the system? And where do you see, sort of from your perspective, from your sector, of how it can function at a greater level? So Gretchen, you want to start us off with that?
Sure. Since it's a 4-state collaboration, I feel like we get this question a lot, or, it's got growing pains associated with it when you have 4 states working together, or when we were doing MASTO and they were 8 states working together. I think, some of the collaboration comes from the standpoint of being able to be flexible and adaptable. Each state has specific regulations or statutes they have to follow. And sometimes when working with private industry or trying to do some of this, new technology or problem solving for private industry, some of those statutes can be challenging. And then you've got the federal requirements coming down for how some of that's used as well with the interstates. And so one of the things that the coalition wants to do moving forward is also focus on things they could do from a policy or a permitting clearance standpoint that might add more flexibility than they've had in the past to, how they do business in that area, to allow more innovations and flexibility for the private sector to get engaged. But that's going to be, kind of a change in how they've done business and how they've done permitting and clearances and things like that in the past. And so that's one of the, I think, opportunities, but also one of the challenges, as they think about how can we collaborate better together. And so it's something that gets talked about a lot when they think about, what's next for the coalition, where could we go next as a group to work together.
Troy, any thoughts on how fleet services or managers can be part of this conversation of how do we cooperate better across lines?
What really sticks in my head on the subject is what Mario said: put a stake in the ground, and make something happen now. We're seeing that a lot of the barriers to our deployment, just on this low, scale, right, is just about the different stakeholders trying to come together and put everything together in a timeline. One of your questions about COVID, how did it affect the deployment of electric vehicles or our project? It was used often by contractors and subcontractors, and it went on for months and months where there are evidence of severe labor shortages in different types of industries. So all these things happening, I feel like we're buried in regulation and bureaucracy, and we're better than this. It should be more simple. It should be more direct. It should be more available, and we can do this. We can make deployments bigger and faster. I'll just give you an example real quick. I'm trying to get electric forklifts for our Los Angeles facility. We've got like 24 forklifts we're trying to deploy. We're trying to participate in a program which we missed a window in the first year, and now we're in the second year trying. We've turned everything in. We've got all the things there. We have to wait till December before we know if we've been accepted and we're going to receive the funding to help put in infrastructure and deploy these forklifts. And even then, it won't be till March of next year when they will actually release funds. Mm-hmm. And what I find odd is, even if you have resources and you could do it now and wait for the reimbursement, you can't. So in other words, I can continue to emit the same greenhouse gases for longer when I could be reducing the greenhouse gases already, just knowing that the decision-making process is very cumbersome, and it's frustrating at times. My business, my career for the last 40 plus years is pickup and delivery in the next day market. Pick up today, deliver tomorrow. We're constantly, how do we make this happen? The deployment or electrification of fleets and what we're trying to do is nothing like that. Like I said, kickoff was March of 2019. Our project didn't really mature until this year, where we got all things running that were parts of the project. That's too long.
Yeah. Rebel, thank you for that, Troy. It's true. Rebel, any thoughts on how we have greater collaboration?
That's not my subject of expertise, Kimberly. So you guys know more about than I do.
Okay. All righty, thank you. And then Mario, any thoughts on greater collaboration? And then we have a question.
Well, I think it's been said. I could say it in other words, but it's understanding somebody said it before, understanding what's in it, or what are the drivers for each agency, and what are the limitations in those agencies also, right? And I think each group or stakeholder telling their story several times, it takes quite a bit of time to everybody to understand and digest what's the drivers and what are the limitations for each agency, and understanding and finding that sweet spot, which is what Gretchen refers to being flexible, I would say.
All right, thank you so much. We have one last question here for Troy. As a company that is testing out electric trucks, is there any industry movement for investigating setting up a network of battery pack swapping to keep goods moving without waiting to recharge every 100 to 200 miles? Similarly, what's the discussion on hydrogen fuel cell while the electric grid infrastructure is still limited? Great question. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, those are great questions, and I've asked them myself before. I'm not a subject matter expert. I can tell you that when we initially talked about the project, we were talking, I'll mention the manufacturer, with Tesla even, and we were asking about, being able to swap out battery packs. And there wasn't much interest in it from any OEM that we're aware of at the time. This could have changed, but because technology is rapidly changing every day. So as it is right now, they're more focused on the battery electric, I think, to faster charging, being able to get it done quicker. Some projects are using, you don't have to buy 2 trucks necessarily to get this job or the duty cycle out of, that one truck can do today, a diesel truck. But they are adding additional trucks and then having them on the charger, and while one is out, when one comes back in, they jump out of one truck and plug in the other and go back out, right? And a third guy can get in that rotation, the fourth guy, depending on how many trucks you have. So these are concepts that can help add or extend how you use a battery electric truck, but very expensive when you think about it. You got to buy, these trucks are 3x the cost of diesel trucks right now, right? So if you're trying to buy additional trucks just to get that rotation going, it can be very expensive. On the fuel cell side, interesting, I've picked up a little bit. I understand fuel cell technology is not new. It's been around for quite some time. But what I understand, it's not as efficient as battery electric still. Battery electric is reported to be about 90+% efficient versus a fuel cell electric, which is I heard 60% efficient. And then internal combustion is somewhere at 25% efficient. So these are just numbers I heard. I'm not quoting them as being accurate, but that's what I understand.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Troy. And thank you all for joining us today. Unfortunately, we are out of time. It's we have 1 minute to complete up. I'd like to thank all of our speakers and our sponsors, and of course, the planning committee members who have all been an integral part of bringing this conversation to us today. I would like to thank also Danny Chung, who is staff at the LTC, for all of his support in helping us run the dialogue today. And then finally, I'd like to extend an invitation to our next dialogue, which will be December 14th, the last one for this year, and which will be looking at a year of transportation innovations in the Inland Empire. I hope you'll be able to join us for that discussion. With that, thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a great week. Take care, everybody.